Welcome to Kevin Deal Photography, where I take you on my journey through photography. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about what I hope to see in the second version of the GFX100S. Welcome to today's episode. If you're not familiar with Kevin Deal Photography, we do gear reviews, tips, techniques, and tutorials, and sometimes we dive into film. If any of that sounds appealing to you, click the subscribe button below. So the GFX100S MKII. No, this is not some special announcement. Fuji has not made an announcement about a GFX100S MKII. I'm simply talking about a concept, something I hope to see in the next version of the GFX100S, which I own. I've had this camera for almost a year, and now I feel like I've had enough time to talk about the things that I hope they put in the next version of it. So on today's episode, we are going to talk about the 5 things I would like to see Fuji implement in the next version of the GFX100S. And we're going to start with number 1, which is probably something that most of you are wanting as well, and I want an upgraded autofocusing system. As a Canon user coming over to Fuji, if I'm being completely honest, the Achilles heel of all Fuji cameras up until about this year was the autofocus. On the X side of things, they finally are starting to figure it out with the XH2 and the XH2S and the X-T5. But before that, the autofocusing left a lot to be desired. Now, multiply that by 2 or 3 and you get into the GFX line, where if you take pictures of things that move, well, the GFX kind of sucks for that. Now, they did make some improvements on the GFX100S, but if you compare it to literally any full frame, literally any micro four thirds, literally any APS-C camera, this lags behind. And for the money that you pay for it, I really do hope that Fuji can take this and improve upon it in the second version. I find myself missing about 1/3 to half of my shots when I have a model, in a base pose, just, hands behind the pockets, move forward, move off to the side, just flow posing, right? Like all of you photographers who shoot models do. I find there are so many times where something is out of focus, and I find it to be very frustrating. In low lighting situations like in the studio, it gets a lot worse. And then the camera, for whatever reason, and I will say, I'm a back button focuser. I hold my thumb down, I track a subject, I hit the shutter release when I'm ready to take the picture. That's how it works in literally every camera I've ever owned that has some sort of a tracking built into it. When I do that on the GFX100S, sometimes without any explanation whatsoever, as soon as I press down on the shutter release, it's locked in, and all of a sudden it'll go, I'm no longer gonna lock onto this anymore. And then it'll throw it out of focus and then take the picture. That really frustrates the hell out of me. And that's something that I hope to see Fuji fix on the next version of this camera. And yes, I do know all you fanboys are gonna be like, look man, you should have known what you were getting into when you bought the GFX100S. I did know what I was getting into. I knew I was gonna get a lot of misses in exchange for some amazing hits when it hit. All I'm asking is that for the price that we pay for this camera moving forward, I simply hope that the next version of it has much better hit rates. Number 2, let's talk about overheating. This may not be an issue for some of you, but it is for me. I shoot weddings here in Austin, Texas, where it gets about 100 to 110 degrees in the middle of July. I tried this guy out at a wedding in July, an outdoor wedding that was at like 2 o'clock. I did not even get through the beginning of the ceremony before I started getting overheating warnings. And by the time I got to the vows, I pretty much had to turn off the camera and put it away until we did the couples portraits, where it shined beautifully, but I expected it to shine beautifully there because I had a controlled environment. I could take my time and all that. But if you're a wedding photographer, you know you can't afford to miss moments, and so you need reliability. I have to be completely honest that the GFX100S in hot environments where you have to take a lot of pictures, it's an unreliable camera. And so that's something that you need to keep in mind if maybe you're looking up this camera and you're thinking about getting it for wedding photography. You're gonna definitely need at least 2 of them, because once this thing starts getting hot, you're gonna have to pull the second one out. And yeah, you do need more than one of the same camera anyway, usually if you're shooting weddings, because you wanna have a backup. I was more experimenting with it. I shoot Canon for weddings, but I wanted to see if I could even do it with the Fuji. And well, I'm unfortunately going to report that it's not quite there yet. I do hope that the second version of this will do better at that, because When you think about it, overheating warnings, I usually think of video. We're just taking pictures, and yes, I do know that the file sizes are enormous. If you're shooting in uncompressed and you're trying to take several pictures, it has to do some fast processing, but I do hope that they are able to knock that out. Let's talk about the third thing that I hope they fix, which ties into the last one, which is I want them to use CF Express cards in this camera. Why this camera uses SD cards when you have 102 megapixels is beyond me. I want speed, and CF Express gives me that. Why they didn't at least put one in the first slot is beyond me on the GFX100S, but now that I'm seeing the XH2, which I'm recording myself with right now, and the XH2S at the very least putting a Type B in slot A. I think since this is a flagship medium format, the file sizes are enormous. Hopefully they'll put 2 CF Express cards in the future version of this because it needs it. I think some of the shortcomings that we have with it being able to process files fast enough is tied to the fact that it just can't write and read fast enough. Maybe we can get that taken care of with a Type B version, the CF Express. So I hope to see a CF Express dual card slot in the future version of this camera because frankly, it needs it. Number 4, and this is something that annoys the hell out of me of all camera manufacturers who don't do this, but this is a $6,000 camera body, and when you look at the sensor, I mean, that sensor is enormous. I can totally hit it with my fingers. It's just super exposed and super vulnerable to the elements. And it doesn't really matter what you do. If you're outside, you know, you're at white sands, you're on the beach and you're trying to change lenses, you're just gonna expose this sensor and make it vulnerable to getting dust and debris. I actually ran into this problem when I went to the Grand Canyon. I had a bead of sweat just fall off my head and hit that piece of glass that's right in front of the sensor, and I unfortunately did not have a cleaning kit with me, and therefore I had to go the rest of the vacation with a bead of sweat on all my shots that I had to Photoshop out. It was terrible, and I wish that Fuji, when you turn on and off the camera, would have a window that would go up and down over the sensor. If there were a commonly used camera that needs it, the Fuji GFX system is absolutely #1 on that list of camera systems that could benefit from having a window that closes in front of it when you're changing lenses, the camera's off. And to demonstrate how cheap this technology must be, you take a company like Canon, you take something like the R7, and I want to preface that even though Fuji goes all in on the X mount for APS-C, APS-Cs are afterthoughts for Canon. They do full frame, that's their bread and butter, and APS-Cs, they always get the trickle down features. They never get the state-of-the-art features. However, I have an R7, which is 1/4 the price of a GFX100S, and look at that, there is a window over the sensor. I'm gonna briefly open it up and expose it. So there you go. Now the sensor is open, but as soon as I turn it off, it's gonna go away, just like that, which is great. So I'm shooting with the lens. I turn off the camera. About a second later, you hear a noise. The noise happens, you take off your lens, and look, there it is. There's a window over it. And then I can grab my other lens, I can put it on, and then I flip the button, and now power's going, the sensor's exposed, but it's covered up by a lens now. And it seems like it would be such an easy thing for companies like Fuji to implement, and I hope to see that in the GFX 100S Mark II because it really needs it. Now let's talk about number 5, and lots of you Fuji users can probably relate to my gripe on this one, which is put a directional pad on the back of this. I can go out and get any new Fuji camera, an XH2, an XH2S, an XT5, and go back generations to like an XT4. Hell, I can even go to my XT20 from 2017, which is like several tiers below the best. And even that has a directional pad. And for such a sophisticated camera, I don't know why they don't have the directional pad customization there. I find myself looking for extra buttons that unfortunately don't exist. And I do think that Fuji could greatly benefit from adding that to the next version of this camera. Yes, I do know that they have the thing where you can swipe the screen on the back, but if I'm being completely honest, one of the weaknesses of all Fuji cameras is the touch screen on the back. I tend to deactivate it because I don't really find it to be intuitive compared to Canon and other companies. So I would like to see them put a directional pad on the new version of the GFX100S, and I think that would be fantastic. I'm gonna give you one more bonus thing I would like to see Fuji put in the GFX100S Mark II. And this is really a plea to all camera manufacturers. I hope that they put a tracking device in the future versions of this camera and all their cameras. Now, you conspiracy theorists out there might be like, well, I don't want them to know where my position is. Well, you use a freaking smartphone, and so they already know where you live anyway, by the way. But one thing I've never heard anybody say when their camera gets stolen is, boy, I sure am glad I never had a way to figure out where my camera was. And so yeah, I say lots of other things that might get my monetization taken away, lots of new words that you might learn if somebody steals my really nice camera. When you think about it, there is going to need to be some sort of an investment in an online portal, something like Find My Phone, but now it's Find My Fuji. And if you sell your Fuji to somebody on the secondhand market, the online portal is going to have to transfer over to their account just like it would with your phone. But when you think about this technology, it's not that expensive. People throw in phones that have tracking in them with phone plans. You can buy AirTags for $20, $25. You can buy AirPods for $150 and they have tracking in them. So right now I'm using AirTags in the lining of my bag, but guess what? If somebody steals my bag and my camera, but then they remove the camera from the bag, I only know where the bag is. I don't know where the camera is. I am totally fine maybe draining my battery a little bit more in order to know where my camera is at all times, especially when you consider how much GFX100S's cost. I don't know a camera owner in the world who wouldn't want to track down their camera in that unfortunate event. I'd like to see tracking devices put in cameras. I don't think it's an expensive technology. I do think it's a very beneficial technology for the industry, and I hope Fuji and other camera manufacturers will figure that out. So anyway, that is today's episode. Thank you for indulging me and listening to me talk about what I hope to see in the next version of this camera. Did you like what you saw today? If so, tell me in the comments below. I appreciate the comments. And is there something you want to see in the new version of the GFX100S? If so, tell me about that in the comments below. I love having a healthy dialogue, see what you want to see in the next version of this camera. I am going to be putting out more Fuji videos in 2023. I did a lot of Canon in 2022. My resolution was to push more Fuji, so here I am pushing Fuji. I thank you all for watching this episode today. If you like this channel, click the subscribe button below. I hope you all have a wonderful new year, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.